there was a company called Blackwater, and then they changed their name to J, right? And then they they've been through like multiple different names. And part of the reason why you do that is because you've developed such a horrible reputation.
Yeah. Why would Blackwater have to rebrand?
It was J. You're right. It was J, and was again renamed Academi.
Yeah, it's their own third name. Eric Prince, brother of Betsy DeVos. He is a mercenary, but he's also involved in God knows what else stuff. But
Betsy DeVos what is she involved in?
She was Secretary of Education.
Before that was like
big
Amway.
Hardcore Amway, but
Amway,
hardcore Christian
charter school. Yeah, right.
And charter school, but her big thing was that public education is good, public schools are bad, meaning we can collect the money, but then we got to spend it on private schools, and really she wants to spend
religious
it on
schools.
Madrasas. I'm sorry, not madrasas, Christian schools. Sorry.
Yeah, and maybe those schools might have just like less foreign policy or less discussion of, I don't know, things like imperialism, where the students are educated, or science, right?
But here is Blackwater founder, CEO Eric Prince weighing in on the concept of imperialism.
Oh, great!
All this talk of illegal migration in Europe, in the United States, it ultimately comes down to a contest of what is governance, who is governed, which countries are governed well, and if so many of these countries around the world are incapable of governing themselves, then it's time for us to just put the imperial hat back on to say, we're going to govern those countries if you're incapable of governing yourselves, because enough is enough. We're done being invaded.
Because our own national security risk is at stake.
Exactly.
National security interests are at stake.
You can say that about pretty much all of Africa. They're incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens, because the governments there are all about looting and pillaging and lining their pockets and going shopping in Paris, instead of actually making their country better.
People on the left are going to watch this. They're going to say, wait a minute, Eric Prince is talking about being a colonialist again.
Absolutely. Yes. Enough. Because if you go to these countries and you see how they suffer under absolutely corrupt, made-up governments that are just criminal syndicates.
Made-up governments.
The people of Africa, the people of Latin America, a lot of them deserve better. Now, some countries are really getting it together. Look at what El Salvador did. Bukele, murder capital of Latin America, he said, no more. Now El Salvador is safer than Prince William County.
And he took
just
all
south of Washington, D.C. He put...
So, first of all, I like the idea that America took its imperial hat off at some point.
Right.
Well, sorry, just I have to note on that, like, there was a massive decolonization over the last century, and it wasn't because Western powers got woke and decided to start being nicer. It was because there was violent uprisings across the globe, and they kicked our asses out, saying "our" loosely as the West, whether that was Vietnam or Algeria or whatever. Like, this wasn't just we stopped listening to guys like Eric Prince, is that we listened to them to the point where that couldn't be sustained anymore, and we got blown out.
I mean, it's all too like just the idea that these African governments, or whoever he's talking about, or in Latin America, that they're just corrupt, and we need the stabilizing force of the United States to come in and make them less so. Why are some of these governments in complete shambles? In part because of like basically wholly because of like the extraction and the Western influence not really caring about stability in those countries, but purposely destabilizing them or
them
for our own
placing
ends.
them, inserting essentially our guys in these situations. I mean, look, to be fair to Eric Prince, he wants to get the contract to go in and do the colonializing. I mean, this is
exactly. He's marketing right now.
It's marketing, but I also think he probably believes it.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And where is the tie-in with this type of like sort of fundamentalism? It is, and we still practice this. U.S. law is still. This is still a major facet of U.S. law when it comes to taking land from indigenous people in this country the idea of doctrine of discovery is still cited. It was most recently studied by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Actually, it was studied. It was cited more recently. In the past year or two in a case, I think it was. But even RBG didn't cite the doctrine of discovery per se, but its whitewashed version from a case from the early 1800s. I can't remember the name of the lawyer that I spoke to about this. We did an interview on it. But the doctrine of discovery is a papal edict from 1490s that essentially we still operate under in this country when it comes to Native American lands. It basically says, like, we're Christian, we know better.
If we find it, it's ours. Finders keepers.
Well, it's not even, you're not even necessarily find it. It's more like,
Takers keepers.
See it, takers keepers.
Wanters keepers.
But
just
God
might equals right.
has said it's okay for us to do this.
Yeah.
And that's basically what he's saying here too. We know better for the people of these countries, and we're going to come in and we're going to act as a colonial power so that we can get these people back on their feet and exploit all their resources.
And we just have to address the El Salvador example that he brought up. So El Salvador has, Bukele has caused a fall in gang violence. I would just point out that some of those gangs, for instance, MS-13, have their origins in the American prison system, and we exported them back into El Salvador. But a lot of that is like deals with gangs and like letting one gang become a monopoly, and also states of exception, which expire at certain point. So how long that sort of improvement lasts is another question. I would also say you didn't hear him mention the Bitcoin thing that Bukele was famous for, because that has been a failure, and poverty is worse since he's taken over. So I don't know that really Bukele is the example. If that's the best example, I'd say like fascism doesn't really have a lot of good offerings in the shop window.
People can go check out Peter D'Errico. It was federal anti-Indian law, the legal entrapment of indigenous people. That interview was from, what was the date on that? We'll put a link in the...
October 9th.
October 9th on this program.